Good morning. My name is Elaine Wilson, and I am a member of Westminster's Hunger Ministry team. The social justice forums are built around a common theme, and for this program year, our theme is Wade in the Water, Becoming Anti-Racist. And at every forum we hold this year, we hope that each of us will listen intently to voices beyond those of white privilege and to reflect on how we as a community of faith can help change a racialized system. So today we are welcoming Pat Pearson, the Director of Agency Relations for Second Harvest Heartland. We are going to talk about racism, food access, hunger relief, and the work that Second Harvest is doing in our communities. For questions, please enter questions in the Q&A and we will answer them throughout the presentation. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Welcome, Pat, and please give us first maybe an overview of the work that Second Harvest Heartland does. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm going to share my screen. I have a few slides that really outline what Second Harvest does. I think that'll be a nice way to start. Okay, here we go. Second Harvest Heartland, I think just to, here we go. Just to give you an idea, I think, of the issue of hunger first, and what we are working with is in Minnesota and Western Wisconsin, which is where our service area is. 1 in 8 people experience the stress of hunger, not knowing where their next meal comes from. And that before COVID was 1 in 11, so that's really jumped. Hunger creates long-term costs in our communities. It affects health, it affects development, it affects education and our workforce. And we really believe in this country of plenty, that no one should actually go hungry. Second Harvest Heartland is part of a national network of food banks, the Feeding America network. And we're one of the largest food banks in the country. We serve 41 counties in Minnesota and then 18 counties in Wisconsin. So it's geographically, it's quite large. And our mission, you know, everywhere you go, all over our building, is our mission is to end hunger together. So to end hunger with all the partners that are out in the network. We really look to use creative solutions to connect neighbors with resources. I think just to strengthen the network, that's something that we continually strive for. And with the partners that we work with, about 74% of the food that they receive comes from our food bank. This just kind of gives you an idea of how large the network is and how far we go out. We work with 1,000 partners, could vary from a food shelf, a soup kitchen, or an on-site meal program, shelters, rehab. We've also branched out and are working with schools and health clinics as well. So it's really a shared hunger relief network. I just thought this was interesting and wanted to show this to you. This is in 2008, what our pounds were made up of. In a food bank, everything's pounds. That's just how we refer to food. So in 2008, 23% of the food that we distributed was fresh. So dairy, meat, produce, and then some bakery too. And that was something that we really wanted to increase, to really provide fresh and nutritious food to the partners that we work with, and then ultimately their clients. And so it's almost tripled the amount of fresh food that we do provide in our network. So that gives you an idea of what Second Harvest does and what we're about.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about the connection between racism and hunger.
Mhm.
How do you at Second Harvest see that? How do you experience it? How do you understand that? What can you share with us
Yeah.
about that connection?
Mhm. I think, in every community across the country, there is hunger. It's in in the rural areas of our state. It's in the suburban areas, and it's in the urban areas. It's not exclusive to any one geography. And I think, you see parents skipping meals. You see parents doing things to make their meals go a little farther, maybe by watering down milk or making a soup of some sort. And I mentioned before that hunger has really increased since COVID. We've gone from 1 in 11 to 1 in 8. And for children, it's even higher, it's 1 in 5. Um, but not every community experiences the hunger surge the same way. So in Black and Latinx and Indigenous communities, they're at least twice as likely to live with hunger than white families are. While we feel it's unacceptable for any family to go hungry, I don't think that ability should be dependent on, excuse me, on zip code where you live or your race. But that's the reality right now. And I think with almost these depression level hunger that is happening right now because of the pandemic, the disparities are even more visible and it's even more crucial to solve.
Oh, thank you.
Mhm.
So what has been Second Harvest Heartland's journey to address the connection between racism and hunger? How have you been uh,
Mhm.
working on that?
Yeah. Our overall focus is steady on the mission of hunger and how we can end that together. We can't do it alone. No organization can do it alone. So, how do we strengthen the existing hunger relief network statewide? Um, we believe that addressing the food system and making it better and more efficient will better serve all of our neighbors and is really critical to achieving the mission of ending hunger. But we're still listening and we're learning about the best ways to change the way food gets to folks in our communities. And so meanwhile, we're refocusing our efforts on tackling the pandemic surge and confronting the inequities in food access. So really asking ourselves those difficult questions and, why are the systems the way they are with the inequities? For starters, so since the end of March, we have been doing these large scale food distributions in counties across our service area. And what we found is that these distributions, they'd be 500 to 800 families that would come to these distributions, cars, just a truck to trunk model. So really safe in terms of COVID. But what we found when we started surveying people is that over half of the people that attended those distributions had never been to a food shelf. So it was really new to them. And I think that um, to access a food shelf or services can be a really it can be very stigmatizing. You may not feel comfortable sharing your income. You may be ashamed, that you need the help, when in reality, any of us can be in that situation, if we lose our job or there's something catastrophic that happens. And I think that is exacerbated in communities of color. One, because um, again, they may not feel comfortable, using the resources and with their neighbors there. it might have something to do with documentation. There are myths about the programs, government programs and how those can affect their people's status in the country. And so that is really makes people hesitant to participate. So things like that are really easy. There's no qualifying, there's no paperwork. You just show up in your car and you get food. So no questions asked. So that's a really non-threatening, welcoming way to participate in to receive more food, to stretch your dollar or to stretch your SNAP dollars. I think that to effectively work on the many challenges in front of us, we need to be really honest about the stark racial disparities and who's hungry. We've done a few panels. Our CEO has done a few panels on racism and hunger. And one of our partners from the University of Minnesota said, these inequities did not come about overnight and they won't be resolved overnight. So it's just continuing to have those difficult conversations and together to come to solutions. We're really committed to the effort. We've been working on partnerships with organizations of color. We have a partnership with Appetite for Change as part of our Minnesota Central Kitchen, and they prepare meals that we provide and distribute. Also, the Sioux Chefs Indigenous Kitchen in Minneapolis as well. Some other organizations. We've done some work this year with the Lower Sioux Reservation as well in Minnesota. So we're learning as we go.
Thank you. I'm wondering, at some of your pop-up events, are you able to provide culturally differentiated food to individual food shelves or to individuals who come to these pop-up events, or do people kind of get the same thing? Is that a growing understanding for you?
I think it's a growing reality. We have always promoted client choice, and what that means is, going to a food shelf and being able to shop just like you would go to a grocery store. With the large distributions like that, it's not possible. There's 500 or 600 cars and you have a couple hours to get people through. And so it's prepackaged boxes of food that we distribute. I mean, it is still produce, it is still fresh, frozen meat and fresh dairy, but not the choice, unfortunately. Culturally specific foods are something that we are continuing to work on. Right now, the supply chain is there's some kinks in it, I guess you could say, and we're having trouble getting certain foods in at the quantities that we want. But we are sourcing things like masa flour, wild rice. We have goat meat, halal goat meat. So things like that we're continuing to try and build up an inventory of.
Thank you. We're excited to hear about your partnerships with the organizations of color. I don't know if you want to say anything more about Appetite for Change or the Sioux Chef before we move on?
So we started the Minnesota Central Kitchen at the very beginning of COVID, and for a number of reasons. One, to put out of work food service staff and chefs back to work, and then also to provide prepared meals. We found that there was a need for that. And we worked with Loaves and Fishes. They have many dining sites throughout the Twin Cities, but weren't able to do that particular model because of COVID. And so we've worked with them and a number of other kitchens, including Sioux Chef and Appetite for Change, to create these meals and then to immediately ship them out to the different locations where people come and pick them up and then take them home to eat. The partnership that I mentioned with the Lower Sioux Reservation in southern Minnesota, that was started actually before COVID, and it's a large scale distribution where we have produce and, you know, same types of things, produce and meat, and then serve the families as they come through. So there, at that point, when we first started it, there were options for clients to choose from. And then when COVID started, we had to go to a prepackaged model. But that's been a really successful partnership.
Thank you. How did Second Harvest Heartland respond to the murder of George Floyd? Did that, I mean, so it's on top of and on top of and on top of this year. We've had one thing, we had hunger, and we've had COVID exacerbating hunger and the racial disparities, and now the murder of George Floyd. Do you want to speak about that response?
Yeah, we so we do a lot of work in Minneapolis. You know, before we work with a lot of partners in Minneapolis, and when George Floyd was killed, and there was you know, a lot of buildings were damaged, and mostly the grocery stores in South Minneapolis in that neighborhood. So there really was no way for families, especially if they don't have transportation, to get food. You know, whether they go to a food shelf or whether they go to a grocery store. So the first week we did quite a few emergency deliveries into neighborhoods with things like water, diapers, formula, some of the more basics, milk, and would just get those out either to pop-up distributions where, you know, there'd just be a distribution happening right there and then, or to the food shelf. So it was much more food than they needed much more food than they would typically distribute, just because there were no other sources in the neighborhoods. We also worked with Minnesota Central Kitchen and brought a lot of hot and prepared meals into the neighborhood. And everyone was just really flexible and, you know, was really able to adjust quickly to the need. And then after things settled down a little bit, we started doing these larger scale distributions that were more regular in the neighborhood. So it would be, you know, we do one in Powderhorn Park every Friday that is mostly geared towards Latinx families. We work with the cultural liaison in Minneapolis, and that's specifically who the outreach goes to and the programs for. We did a few distributions at a school in Minneapolis, large scale, again, the type where you drive through. And then we do one at Holy Trinity as well. So just kind of regular until things start to even out in the neighborhood, and then there are more resources. We did, I think it was probably about 200 of the pop-ups that we did. So, and we continue to do the Powderhorn. We're moving to a warm place next week. So we'll continue that throughout the winter as well. Yeah, and I think, you know, just to, so you understand like the scale of the Minnesota Central Kitchen, we've served 740,000 meals since March, and employed 140 workers. And then we had 10 kitchen sites. So not only Appetite for Change and the sous chef, but there were some corporate kitchens as well, you know, where there were no employees on site. And so the kitchen was sitting idle, and so it was used.
Wow. Wow. Are are grocery stores beginning to come back online in the neighborhoods that were the most affected by the unrest?
Yes, slowly they are coming back. The Cub on Broadway started opening kind of in stages, what they offered probably about a month and a half or 2 months ago. So slowly. And I think also the food shelves in the area have been able to adjust, to the situation. At first it was a lot, but just to kind of take a step back and make plans for going forward. So yeah, it's being rebuilt, and hopefully it'll be back up to where it was soon.
Great, thank you. What are areas that our faith community can be engaged with, and are there advocacy opportunities or action opportunities that people from Westminster could potentially be involved with? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, there's lots of opportunities, I think. Maybe a little different now with COVID, but we do. Second Harvest does advocacy work at the state level for mostly for school meals and for SNAP. And I think informing yourself, knowing how to get the word out, understanding, what the advocacy is for. Um, SNAP has been affected several times at the national level, and doing that advocacy at the state level to really raise awareness, I think is important. Of course, always supporting the work through financial donations is, always appreciated. When COVID hit, because of limited budgets for food shelves and agencies, we've provided grants for our food shelf partners, and then we also are providing the food and the delivery. We're waiving those fees until the end of the calendar year, and so those things, cost money, and so always financial support. And then, maybe when it's safe, we have this beautiful new facility in Brooklyn Park that is full to the brim. When we built it, we thought we would have 5 years to get to that point, but we moved in March, right after COVID hit, and we are full to the brim now. In fact, we're renting space. But that food needs to be packed, and there's always an opportunity for a church group or a corporate group or a school group to come, and it's really a lot of fun. Yeah,
Those opportunities are available to come and pack food now or in the future?
they
I've
have.
done that in the past.
Yeah, we do have some opportunities now. The groups are a little smaller and they're spaced, for safety, but yeah, they're available now too. They're a lot of fun. And it's fun to see the facility too. It's a really nice, open, efficient building.
Oh, neat.
Mhm.
I think I heard your executive director on NPR with Carrie Miller or Angela Davis a week or so ago, and she was talking about SNAP, as you mentioned, and how effective that is for getting food into the hands of people who really need it. Do
Yeah.
you want to elaborate on that maybe a little bit more?
Sure. I was talking about stigma earlier, and how it's difficult for some people to access a food shelf or to admit that they need help. With SNAP, we have a team who helps with the the assistance piece. So there's the copying of documents, making sure that it's moving along in the county, and we have bilingual staff, who can help as well. And when you get your benefits, you get a card, an EBT card. So it looks like a debit card or a credit card. And you can go to the grocery store and you can pick, you can choose your own food. So you have choice. You can choose the foods that are important to you and your culture. You can choose foods that your children love. And when you go to the checkout, nobody knows that you are on SNAP. So it's anonymous, and yet it's a very respectful, anonymous way to get your food. And it's relatively easy to participate. And now with the pandemic, the SNAP program has also added additional benefits to the program as well. So you do have additional dollars to use.
And an advocacy opportunity is to make sure that our legislators know how important the SNAP program is when its funding comes up for reauthorization. And that's both at the state and federal level, is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I think that is definitely an advocacy opportunity. I think, in the past year and a half, there have been a number of attempts or suggestions to cut SNAP spending. That generally comes from the federal level. And so that's an opportunity as well. And just, I think there are a lot of myths about what SNAP is and what it provides to families, and how the system works. And I think just educating yourself on SNAP and knowing really what a strong program it is beneficial as well.
Thank you. And you mentioned earlier about working with schools, and I know that the children, a lot of families would get food from schools and meals, breakfast and lunch, both the children, and sometimes they would get weekend meals as well. And now that when schools were closed in the spring, do you want to say a little bit more about how that's going now that schools are back, at least some of them in person or remote, or the hybrid models? How is that going?
Yeah, well, there's a couple different ways that kids still get fed. Kids that are on either free or reduced lunch or breakfast, who aren't in school, don't get meals. And that's something that many families depend on. So when schools closed in the spring, there was a lot of work done at the federal level and the state level to provide meals for kids through this same program, but with a different setup. So kids could go to the school and pick up prepared meals and then take them home. Some of the school districts actually distributed meals at the regular bus stop route. So kids would go to their bus stop and they would pick up meals that way. What a great way to get meals out into the community. We're doing a pilot right now with a suburban school district and distributing prepared meals through Minnesota Central Kitchen to the schools, and then the families can pick those up. So those meals would be for the adults as well as the children. The school meals obviously are just for the kids. And then we also work with schools on on-site food shelves as well. So a family could, if they felt like they needed some additional food to close the gap, they could visit the food shelf also at the school, and most schools have it set up so it's very anonymous. So different things like that we've been working with schools on, and it's really a natural fit because schools are such an integral part of the community. It just really makes sense to have food and resources available. We also do SNAP outreach at some of the schools that we partner with too. So similar to what we do with our other partners, just helping families navigate the system, what's the next step? What do I need to make a copy of? And then just helping them get the application through the system.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So when you showed your map about where Second Harvest Heartland, is active, and we've talked quite a bit, I think, about the central cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul and the greater metropolitan area.
Mhm.
But do you want to say a little bit more about your work in rural Minnesota? That has to present very different challenges. The food deserts look different in rural Minnesota versus what they look like in the central cities, or just how food gets distributed there. Do you want to say a little bit more about your work in greater Minnesota?
Yeah, I mean, and once you get out into greater Minnesota, the resources in any given county are far less than like a Hennepin or a Ramsey. There could be only two food shelves in a particular county. And so they have to partner together, share that kind of vast territory and serve all those people. Um, you have an aging population out in rural Minnesota, a lot of farmers who are maybe have moved to town but are homebound or don't drive anymore. And so it's difficult for them to get to the food shelf. And just because of sheer geography, I mean, we're just not in those areas as often. Um, so it's been a challenge, and rural Minnesota, as you likely know now, with the COVID, the infections are starting to increase out in rural Minnesota. So food shelves out there have been really innovative. They've moved to models where they will actually deliver the food out to certain households. That's expensive and it's time consuming because of the geography. We have added more routes to rural Minnesota or greater Minnesota, and we've because our fleet has reached its capacity. We've hired a third-party carrier to help with that so that we can get more food out there. And then we've done things like a hub and spoke model where you send a big truck out with, in this case, it's produce, and then the food shelves meet you there and then, take their produce. It's like it's a little more efficient because it's just one stop rather than, sometimes it can be an hour and a half between stops. So it's a little more expedient. Um, yeah, I think also the food shelves in greater Minnesota have also adapted and done more of the curbside service, or making an appointment, calling in and saying, I'd like to come and pick up food, and then having it all prepared for them, the family, so that when they get there, they can just take it.
Sounds like people are being very creative all over the place.
Yeah, I think they really are. It's pretty amazing to see all the things that have come about, and it'll be really interesting to see what stays, after this pandemic is over or has waned a little.
Yeah, I know that I want to share for the Westminster audience a couple of things. One of the food shelves that Westminster partners with is Groveland Food Shelf, and through the summer, they've been their space is very small, and rather than try to crowd people in, they have been, up until I think this week, putting all the food outside every day and
Nice.
letting people come and shop
Uh-huh.
for the food outdoors on the lawn and on the sidewalks at Plymouth Congregational Church, where the food shelf is located. They're thinking about what they're going to do now that the weather is turning cold,
Mhm.
and how to be able to shop and still have people in the building, but be safe for everybody. So again, there's that creativity,
Yeah. Yeah.
going on, for folks it is really exciting to see. People have just really stepped up and
Yeah.
The other thing I'll share for the Westminster community is some of you will remember that in the beginning of October, we received the, let me make sure I say it absolutely correctly, the Peace and Social, let's see, the Peace and Global Witness Offering was received at the beginning of October on World Communion Sunday, and the Presbytery of the Twin Cities designated the local portion of that offering to Second Harvest Heartland. So we are happy that people, for those in the audience listening, for those of you who contributed to that offering, some of your dollars went to Second Harvest. So that's really exciting to be able to share that. So thank you. We did hear earlier this year, I haven't heard too much about it lately, about farmers having to destroy animals, or dairy farmers having to flush milk. And are you aware, is that still going on, or have we figured out how to get those items to the food banks and distributed to people so that we don't have that waste anymore?
I think the waste has been reduced partly because of a program that the USDA developed called CFAP, Coronavirus Farmers Assistance Program. And when I was talking about those large emergency, the pop-ups, the ones that the truck to trunk, a lot of that food is comes from farmers, and it was in response to some of the waste that was going on. We also work with farmers in Minnesota through a grant through the state, and we receive produce directly from the farm. Of course, most of it's gone now, except for the squash, but we received that, starting in late June through now, and that's where we receive a lot of the fresh produce that we distribute to agencies.
Thank you. So one of the things you talked about working with schools, and primarily, I think that's probably preschools and K-12. Are you working with colleges and universities as well? We know that there are, especially, again, in communities of color, people who really struggle to go to school and try to get their educations, and there is hunger among their population. So can you say a little bit about your work there?
Yeah, that's actually really grown in the work and the need actually in the last 5 years or 6 years. We started a food shelf in a local college, community college here in St. Paul, and it was a huge success. And it's just kind of grown exponentially now. We probably have about 15, I would say 15 to 18 food shelves in colleges, and they really vary in terms of what they offer. Sometimes it's maybe just snack foods that students can come and stock up on. Some of the food shelves also distribute fresh fruits and vegetables, but all have the model of no, you don't need to qualify. You can just come in and really participate, and no questions asked. But that's really grown in the last few years.
Yeah. So the needs are so many.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned about how you're now able to provide some halal meats to different of the food shelves. And the other culturally specific foods. How do you gain feedback from the different food shelves about what the needs actually are? What's your process for receiving that kind of information from folks?
A couple different ways, actually. So there's always surveys. We try to limit those because people get tired of them. But we also have, on my team, we have specialists who work out in the community and work with the agencies and the food shelves to, and establish a relationship, and visit and just ask questions and observe. And we try to have a really open communication channel between agencies, and I'm always open for suggestions. But I think one of the best ways to do that is to really just get out and visit. We were doing a lot of visiting before COVID hit, and then we took a break, but we're back on the road now. So just getting out, visiting, getting to know the community, and the specialists, they communicate with partners on a regular basis, so they really do get to know them. We also have an agency advisory council, and it's a 16 member council that's representative of the network. And so we run a lot of ideas past them, have discussions with them about what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And just keep the communication chains open. We also do kind of a webinar platform, where it's not real structured, but just, people come and they just, it's nice to be able to bounce ideas off of your peers and to see what other people are doing. And those are a huge success.
Oh, so enabling the different agencies to talk with one another and to learn from one another about what's working, and to fuel that creativity, it sounds like.
Yeah, and that kind of came about by accident, actually, when COVID started, and because we had started these informational webinars, and then we got all this great feedback saying, we love these, we want to do these, every other week. So we don't do them quite that often, but we do them fairly often.
Great, thank you. So a question came up from the group that's here able to listen in today, about what are the best ways for us to educate ourselves on issues of hunger and advocacy, things like SNAP. What resources can you suggest where we can make sure we're educating ourselves on hunger needs, and both at the local, state, and even national and international level?
Yeah. So the USDA's website is, in terms of facts, is probably the best place to go. Second Harvest, we have a lot of that information on our website as well. I would be happy to send you some of the resources and articles that we cite. We have a resource library for our agencies as well that they can go to. I think too, we've started a panel. We do bi-weekly press conferences on subjects like race and the disparities in the community. So I think there's a lot of information out there. It's just knowing where to go. And I would be happy to share that with you.
Thank you. And your website is 2harvest.org?
Yes.
2 harvest.org. So we want to give a shout out to that.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about rural areas and racial disparities, and you started to, when you talked particularly about the rural areas, about the aging population. What about seniors here in the Twin Cities area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a large senior program that we do at Second Harvest. It's a USDA program, and a lot of the distributions of the boxes are at senior high rises in Minneapolis and St. Paul. And probably in the first month of the pandemic, there were about half of them we weren't able to deliver to or to go to because of infections. I think seniors are isolated. They can't get out of the house. They are reluctant to to seek out assistance. So we partnered with Metro Mobility because they weren't doing a lot of rides, and they basically built bus routes with the food in boxes and then just delivered it to seniors. And I think it's one of those things that might stick after the pandemic because it's just been so hugely successful. And a senior doesn't have to, in the winter, they don't have to brave the ice or the cold, and the food comes right to the door. And this was something that Metro Mobility offered to us. So it's been a great partnership, and it's worked just wonderfully.
Wow, and I imagine some of those seniors, they know their Metro Mobility driver because they use Metro
Yeah.
Mobility services to go other places. So they are already familiar
Mhm.
with their driver and with those folks. And so that's a comfort and a feeling of safety for them.
Yeah. And I will say, I've mentioned a couple of partnerships that we have throughout the community. And when COVID hit, and then when George Floyd was killed, the offers for help or for assistance, we have this, we can give you this, we would love to partner with you on this. The outpouring was unbelievable. It was just the community was just so ready to help and to partner, and everybody had something different to offer.
That's really exciting to hear. And again, that creativity and people's generosity, the spirit, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, so thank you. And we will post the resources that you're able to send to us. I appreciate the ones that you mentioned on our website. And so thank you very much. I think we've answered the questions that people have been asking. We do have time to have a conversation. I think Phil is going to share with us about upcoming social justice forums. And so Pat Pearson, thank you so much for your time today, for your insight, and for sharing the work that you're doing. And it's encouraging to hear that people have been so generous and creative. And thanks for everything you do. And hopefully we'll gather a group of Westminster people together to come to your new facility and pack food.
Wonderful. We'd love to have you. And thank you so much for having me and including me in this conversation.
Great,
We
thank you.
really appreciate all that you have done and all that Second Harvest continues to do. So thanks again for that. And as Elaine was alluding to, I'd just like to announce that the next forum following this in the series is going to be a joint forum with Adult Education on Sunday, November 15. And it's going to be a discussion of the writings of James Baldwin, and it'll tie in with the Westminster Town Hall Forum a few days earlier, November 10th. Eddie Glaude is coming back to Westminster to speak at the Town Hall Forum, and then we'll have a follow-up discussion on the works of James Baldwin. So we look forward to greeting you there. Thank you.